The wind blew cold through the broken streets of old Sector 9. It was evening, and the sky was turning dark red as the twin moons slowly rose. People walked fast, covering their heads, hurrying back to their homes. No one looked at the tall figure standing near the edge of the food market. She was wrapped in an old gray cloak, torn and covered in dust. Her name was Scylla, but no one here knew that, to the humans in this sector. She was just another alien, a beggar, a stranger, a face they didn't want to see. Her skin, a soft blue, with faint glowing lines, showed her Varnari race. Her eyes, once bright and proud, were now tired, heavy, and full of pain. Scylla stood still in front of a small bakery. The smell of warm bread filled the air, and her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Only drank water from a broken pipe near the refugee wall inside the bakery. She saw humans, laughing, buying loaves, giving credits to the baker. She walked closer, her eyes fixed on the smallest piece of bread on the counter. The baker noticed her and frowned. "No handouts," he said sharply. "If you don't have credits, move on." Scylla opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have the words in their language to beg, but her eyes, hollow and sunken, said enough. The baker turned away. Ignoring her, other humans nearby looked but said nothing. She turned slowly to leave. Her hands trembling. She had faced worse, but this hunger. It was cruel. Just then, a small voice spoke. "Wait." Scylla turned, surprised. A little human girl, no older than 7, stood behind her. She had messy brown hair, big eyes, and a face full of innocence. She was holding a small pouch, her lunch bag maybe, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she reached for Scylla's hand. "Are you hungry?" the girl asked softly. Scylla looked down, eyes wide, unsure how to respond. The girl smiled and said, "I don't have bread, but you can be my mom." Scylla blinked, frozen in place. Did she hear that right? The girl repeated, "Be my mom instead." People around stopped and stared. Someone laughed awkwardly. Others whispered, but the girl didn't care. She grabbed Scylla's fingers and pulled gently. "Come," she said. "My tent is not far. I live near the water tanks." Scylla looked around, confused, afraid this was a trap. But the girl's hand was warm and real, and in that moment, something inside her heart moved. A feeling she thought had died long ago. She let herself be led by the child. Step by slow step, they passed broken walls and scattered trash. The girl kept talking cheerfully. "My name is Lena," she said. "My mom went to the stars. Dad, too. I've been waiting for someone." She looked up at Scylla and smiled. "I think it's you." Scylla felt a lump in her throat. This child was too kind, too pure for this cruel world. They reached a small tent made from patched cloth and plastic sheets. Inside was a dirty blanket, an empty cup, and an old solar lamp. Lena sat down and opened her small bag. She took out half a cracker and held it out to Scylla. "Eat," she said. "You look more hungry than me." Scylla hesitated, then took the cracker slowly. She broke it in two and gave half back to Lena. The girl's eyes sparkled. Sharing makes it taste better. They ate in silence. The cold night closing in around them. The stars above looked sharp and far away. Scylla stared at the girl as she curled into her blanket. No fear, no hesitation. Just trust in the silence. Scylla whispered her name. "See?" "Huh," she said slowly, pointing at herself. Lena repeated it happily. "Scylla." She then yawned and said, "Good night, Mom." Scylla froze again, her hands shaking. She hadn't heard that word not in years, not since her own daughter was taken from her during the war, a daughter she thought she'd never replace. But here, in this small broken tent, a new bond was forming, one not by blood, but by something stronger, need, warmth, and the pure heart of a little girl who still believed in family. Scylla stayed awake long into the night. She didn't cry, but her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain for the first time in a long time. She wasn't completely alone, and for the first time since the war. She felt a reason to stay. The night wind howled outside. But inside the small tent, two souls, broken in different ways, began to heal together. The next morning. The camp was waking up slowly. Metal shutters opened with a creak. Engines hummed to life, and smoke from small cooking fires filled the air. But inside the little patched-up tent near the water tanks, it was peaceful. Scylla sat silently, her long arms wrapped around her knees beside her. The little girl was still sleeping soundly, curled up under the thin blanket. Scylla watched her breathe, each breath soft and steady. She didn't understand this child, not fully. Why had the girl offered her a place to sleep? Why had she called her mom? There had been no fear in her voice, no disgust at her alien skin. Only warmth, only trust, only something Scylla had not felt in a long time: belonging. When Lena finally opened her eyes, she smiled at Scylla like they had known each other forever. "Morning, Mom," she said cheerfully, rubbing her eyes. Scylla blinked, her throat too dry to speak. Lena stood up and grabbed her bag, shaking the crumbs out. "Let's go," she said. "They give food early if we line up before the sun climbs." Scylla stood slowly, unsure what to do. Her body ached, but she followed the girl anyway. They walked through the crowded alleyways of the refugee zone. People stared, some in confusion, others in judgment. A small human child walking hand in hand with a Varnar widow was not something you saw every day. But Lena didn't care, not even a little. She waved at the guards, jumped over puddles, and laughed as if she hadn't spent the night in a broken tent. At the food line, an older woman working the counter frowned at Scylla. "She's not registered," the woman said, pointing. "No papers, no food." Lena crossed her arms. "She's with me." The woman raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be, little lady?" "I'm Lena. She's my mom," the girl said proudly. "She lives with me now." A few others in line chuckled quietly. One man muttered, "Another alien pretending to be human family." What a joke. But Lena didn't flinch. She looked the worker in the eyes and said, "Give us 2 trays, or I'll tell Mr. Carlo that you made his favorite kid go hungry." The woman's face changed, eyes going wide. "You're Carlo's girl?" she asked, voice dropping low. Lena shrugged. "He used to give me extra soup." Whether it was true or not, the woman hesitated, then slid 2 trays of food forward without another word. Scylla took hers carefully. Eyes wide with surprise, Lena winked at her and whispered, "See? You just have to act like you belong." They found a quiet corner to sit. Scylla looked at the strange green mush and soft bread on the tray. It wasn't much, but to her, it was a feast. Lena dipped her bread into the mush and made a funny face. "Tastes like old socks," she joked. Scylla let out a tiny laugh. It was weak, but real. Lena's face lit up like the sun. "You laughed," she said. "You really laughed." Scylla nodded slowly, surprised at herself. She hadn't laughed in years, not since the last time she had seen her daughter alive. And yet here she was, feeling warmth, not just from food, but from the child beside her. After breakfast, they returned to the tent. Lena pulled out a small box filled with broken toys. She handed Scylla a little plastic figure with one leg missing and said, "Your turn. Name her." Scylla stared at the figure, then said softly, "Nari." Lena nodded. "Nari, it is." Then she gave her a smaller figure, this one with no head. "This is you," Lena giggled, "because you look serious all the time." Scylla shook her head gently. "No," she whispered. "You make me smile." That night, as they sat by a small fire made of burning cloth scraps and wood chips, Scylla finally spoke more. She pointed to the stars and said, "Varnari. My home." Far Lena looked up. "Is it still there?" Shook her head slowly. "Gone," she said, voice low. Lena didn't ask more. But she leaned against Scylla's side and said, "Then your new home is here, with me." Scylla felt something deep in her chest crack open. This child had lost her family, just like Scylla had, but somehow she hadn't lost her heart. She didn't fear aliens, didn't hate them like many humans in the camp did. She didn't even ask for anything in return. She simply offered love, and for someone like Scylla, who had lived through loss, war, betrayal, and hunger. That was the most powerful thing in the galaxy, as the stars blinked quietly above them, and the fire slowly died down. Scylla looked at the child in her arms and thought, maybe I wasn't meant to die in silence. Maybe I was meant to be found. And so, the alien widow who once had nothing but hunger in her belly and sorrow in her soul began to feel something new. Not just hope, but the beginning of love. That night, while Lena slept curled up in her arms, Scylla could not sleep. The cold wind blew gently through the holes in the tent. But it was not the wind that kept her awake, it was the memories. Memories buried deep, rising again with every heartbeat. She stared at the ceiling, patched with plastic and cloth. And in her mind, she saw fire. She saw the last day she stood on her home planet Varnari Prime. The sky had turned black with smoke. Human warships hovered above the silver towers of her city. And her people had no strength left to fight. Scylla had been a healer once. She had served in the Temple of Restoration. Tending the wounded and the broken, she had known peace. And she had known joy. She had a mate, strong and noble, and a daughter, who laughed with golden eyes. But when the war came, peace was forgotten. The humans didn't start it, but when they were attacked, they hit back harder. The Varnari Council made a terrible mistake. They thought humans were weak because they were kind. They didn't understand that kindness and strength can live in the same heart. When the war began, it was supposed to last a week. Instead, it burned across 10 worlds. And Scylla's planet was the last to fall. She had hidden her daughter in a crystal chamber beneath the temple, but the roof collapsed before she could return. She dug through the rubble with bleeding hands. And when the rescue drones pulled her away, her screams shook the ground. After the war, Varnari survivors were scattered. Many were captured, some enslaved, others abandoned in hidden refugee zones. Scylla became one of the forgotten. Her healing hands now begged for scraps. Her once proud body now wrapped in rags. She had wandered for years, going from planet to station to camp. Each place promised shelter, none gave peace. And every time she saw a little girl playing or laughing, her heart twisted until she met Lena, until the child with messy hair and fearless eyes offered something no one else had, a reason to stay. Scylla sat up slowly and looked at Lena's sleeping face. Even now, she could hardly believe it. Lena had lost her family too, but instead of closing her heart, she had opened it to a stranger. Scylla whispered softly in her own language. A lullaby from her homeworld. Her voice cracked, but she sang anyway. Shenlari, Shenlari, light in the sky, come back to me. Don't let me cry, I will find you. Those stars are far, you are my moon, you are my star. The words echoed in the silence. Scylla wiped her eyes and stood. She stepped outside the tent and looked up at the night sky. The stars above were different from those on Varnari Prime, but they still watched from far above. Silent and cold, she wondered if her daughter's spirit was among them. If somewhere, somehow, the child she lost could see what she had become. Not a healer, not a warrior, not a wife. Just a wandering shadow. But maybe, just maybe, Lena had changed that. maybe she could become something again, not what she was before, but something new. A mother, not by blood, but by bond. The next morning, Sela made a decision. She would not run anymore. She would stay. And she would protect the little girl who gave her purpose. She returned to the tent and waited for Lena to wake, when the girl opened her eyes and smiled. Sela reached into her bag. She pulled out a small crystal shards, smooth, glowing faintly. It was the only thing she had saved from her old life. She handed it to Lena without a word. The girl held it carefully, watching the soft blue light dance in her fingers. "What is it?" she asked. Sela pointed to her own chest. Then to Lena. "Heart," she said softly. Lena smiled and held the shard against her chest. "I'll keep it safe," she whispered. Always that day, they walked through the refugee zone together. Sila no longer kept her head down. Lena introduced her proudly to others. "This is my mom," she said to everyone. Most people laughed or shook their heads. But some, especially the other orphans, looked with envy and wonder. Sila still had no papers. No official name, no protection, but she had something far more powerful, a child who believed in her, and slowly, the stranger began to feel like someone again, someone who had a past, yes, but also someone who now had a future. The day started quiet, but there was tension in the air. Sila felt it the moment she stepped outside the tent. The air was still. The usual noise of children playing and vendors shouting was missing. Something was wrong. Even the guards at the gate stood straighter, watching the road with serious eyes. Lena came out rubbing her eyes, her small hands holding onto the crystal Sila had given her. "What's going on?" she asked, looking around. Sila didn't answer, but her hand gently pushed Lena behind her as she looked down the road. Moments later, a vehicle rolled into the refugee camp, its black frame shining under the dusty sun. It wasn't a normal camp patrol truck. This one was sleek, armored, with a red insignia on the side, Human Coalition Internal Affairs. Everyone knew what that meant. They weren't here to help. They were here to hunt. A tall human man stepped out of the vehicle. He wore a dark uniform, his face half covered by a scanning visor. His right eye glowed red, and a thin drone hovered beside his shoulder. He walked slowly, scanning every alien he passed, one by one. No IDs, no records, deportation. He muttered, "If they resist, stun them." Sila froze. She didn't have papers. Her fake ID was still just an idea, a risk she hadn't taken. Yet she grabbed Lena's hand, ready to turn, ready to hide. But Lena didn't move. She stared at the officer with her usual fearless eyes. "Who is he?" she asked softly. Sila bent down and whispered, "Danger." That one word was enough for Lena to understand. But before they could move, the officer's drone buzzed louder. It turned toward them and began scanning. A bright light shone in Sila's face. She turned away, but the drone locked onto her with a beep. "Unregistered Varnari," the officer said. Stepping forward, he tapped his visor, and a red screen appeared beside his head. No match in refugee database, no work permit, no clearance. He looked down at Lena. "Is this your child?" Sila's heart pounded in her chest. She opened her mouth, trying to form words, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to human language, and fear made her tongue heavy. Lena stepped forward, standing between Sila and the officer. "She's my mom," Lena said boldly. "She lives with me." The officer frowned. "You're a child," he said. "You can't sponsor a refugee." "She's not a refugee," Lena snapped. "She's my family." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She's an illegal alien with no record. Little girl, she's mine," Lena said again, louder this time. "If you try to take her, I'll scream so loud your drone will explode." A few people nearby gasped. The officer looked around, noticing the attention he was getting. He sighed and stepped back, tapping his drone. "Camp leader will hear about this," he muttered. He gave Scylla one last cold look before walking away. As he returned to his vehicle, Lena's hand tightened around Silas. Silas stared at her with disbelief. This tiny human had just protected her, not with strength, but with courage. Real courage. They returned to the tent silently. Scylla sat down, her legs weak. Lena placed a glowing crystal gently on Scylla's lap. "I won't let them take you," she whispered. Ever that night, Scylla didn't sleep. She sat by the small fire, thinking deeply. The officer would return. Next time, he wouldn't walk away so easily. She needed to protect Lena, not just with words or feelings, but with action. She thought about the market, about the dark alley where they sold fake IDs. Dangerous? Yes, but what choice did she have? If she was caught, she would be sent far away, maybe to a labor camp, and Lena would be alone again. No, that could not happen. Scylla had lost one daughter. She would not lose another, not again. Not ever. The next morning, she left quietly. While Lena was still sleeping, she wrapped herself in her cloak and walked toward the market. Each step felt heavy, but her resolve was strong. She passed broken walls, silent shops, and finally reached the edge of the refugee zone. Therein, the shadows, a man with silver fingers waited. His eyes were black, and his smile was thin. "You want papers?" he asked, his voice cold. Scylla nodded, holding out a small pouch of scavenged items, her last valuables. The man took it, checked the contents, then handed her a glowing chip. "Scan wrong. You vanish," he warned. "No refunds." Scylla clutched the chip tightly. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from determination. She would do anything to stay with Lena, even risk everything. She returned to the tent, her cloak damp with morning dew. Lena was awake, waiting, her face worried. Scylla knelt down and showed her the chip. Lena didn't understand it fully, but she smiled anyway. "You're really staying," she said softly. Scylla nodded and placed her hand gently on Lena's head. Together, they sat as the sun began to rise, and in the quiet light of a new day, they both knew family wasn't just blood. It was a choice, and they had chosen each other. The camp felt different after the officer's visit. The silence was heavier. The stares lasted longer. Even children who once smiled at Scylla now looked unsure. Whispers followed her wherever she went. "Illegal," they said. "She'll bring trouble." But Lena didn't change. Every morning, she held Scylla's hand as they walked to the food line. Every evening, she leaned on her shoulder while they watched the stars. She never asked for anything in return. Just one thing. Stay. Scylla tried to act normal, but the pressure was building. She checked the ID chip again and again. Turning it over in her palm, it glowed softly. But that glow meant nothing if it didn't work. She remembered the man's warning. If it scans wrong, you vanish. She had no backup plan, but she had already made her choice. If she vanished, at least she'd do it protecting the one soul who gave her light again. That morning, she tucked the chip inside a pouch under her shirt and stood by the gate. She waited for the woman who handled registrations, a kind old nurse named Mara. Mara had soft eyes, but a strict mouth. She didn't like fakes, didn't like trouble. But she loved children, and she had seen Lena clinging to Scylla like her life depended on it. "What do you want, alien?" Mara asked firmly. Scylla held out the chip and said, "Name." Mara narrowed her eyes, took the chip, and plugged it into the scanner. The screen blinked. Loading, verifying. Scylla clenched her fists. The machine beeped a soft green. Light accepted. Mara looked surprised, then suspicious. "Where'd you get this?" she asked. Scylla didn't answer. She only placed her hand over her chest and said, Lena. Mara stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She entered a name into the system, Scylla Varnair. Doesn't make you a citizen, she said, but it keeps you out of a cage. Scylla bowed her head in thanks. She turned, ready to leave, but Mara called out, "If you hurt that child, I'll find you myself." That evening, Scylla returned to the tent where Lena was waiting. With wide eyes, "You came back," Lena shouted, throwing her arms around her. Scylla smiled and pulled the child close. She took the new ID card from her pouch and placed it in Lena's small hand. "Safe," she whispered. "Stay." Lena beamed with joy and danced around the tent with the card, but something changed after that. Lena began working harder, saving scraps, skipping half her meals. She said nothing about it, only smiled and said, "I'm saving for something." Scylla noticed her shoes getting more holes, her coat thinner. She tried to offer her own blanket, but Lena refused. "You already gave me everything," she said. "Now it's my turn." One day, Lena vanished for hours. Scylla searched the camp in panic. Her heart racing, she found her near the market, bargaining with a trader. A loaf of real bread in her arms, wrapped in warm cloth. The trader was arguing with her. "That crystal ain't worth this much bread, kid." But Lena pushed the tiny blue shard forward, the one Scylla had given her. "My mom gave me her heart," Lena said. "Now I give it for her." Scylla stepped forward, her voice rising for the first time. "No," she cried. "Stop." But Lena shook her head. "I want you to eat real food, not camp mush." The trader sighed and took the shard. Handing over the bread, Lena turned and placed it gently into Scylla's hands. "Now you'll never be hungry again," she whispered. Scylla stared at the bread, her fingers trembling. It was soft, warm, fresh, the kind of food she hadn't tasted in years. But it wasn't the bread that made her cry. It was what Lena gave away to get it. The last piece of Scylla's old life. She dropped to her knees and hugged the girl tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Warm and silent, "You gave your heart," she whispered. "For me." Lena nodded, resting her head on Scylla's chest. "You're my mom," she said. "You gave me more than anyone ever did." That night, they shared the bread together. Every bite was soft and full of meaning. Scylla had been a widow, a refugee, a ghost. Now she was a mother again. Not because of a law, not because of blood, but because love had been proven in the quiet choices, in the bold actions, in the way one little girl saw a starving stranger and gave her everything. The camp gates slammed open early that morning. No warning, no siren, just the roar of engines and the sharp screech of boots on metal. Refugees peeked from their tents, holding children close. Vendors dropped their baskets. Guards froze at attention. They all knew what it meant. Internal Affairs was back. The same dark vehicle rolled in, sleek and powerful. The same officer stepped out, his red visor glowing brighter than before. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 armored drones hovered beside him, and 3 more agents followed behind. He didn't speak, didn't smile. He just lifted a scanner and started moving from tent to tent. 1 beep meant safe, 2 beeps meant suspicious. 3 meant trouble. Scylla felt it before she saw him. She had just finished helping at the water station with Lena when the crowd grew quiet again. Lena squeezed her hand, her voice trembling. "He's here." Scylla turned, her heart thudding like a drum. The officer was only 5 tents away, his scanner beeping steadily. The fake ID card in her pocket felt like it weighed 100 stones. She looked down at Lena, her brave, fearless Lena. But today, there was fear in the girl's eyes. "Go," Scylla whispered. "Hide." Lena shook her head. "No, not without you." The officer spotted them. He lifted his scanner toward Scylla, his eyes narrowing. "You again?" he said coldly, walking over, still pretending to be someone's mother. Scylla stood tall, but her hands trembled. The officer held out his hand, ID, slowly. Scylla reached into her pouch and handed over the card. He inserted it into his device. The machine scanned silently. Lights flashing, Lena held Scylla's arm tightly, whispering over and over, "Please work, please work." Then a long beep, the screen glowed red. "Error, invalid origin files." The officer smirked. "Fake." He looked at his agents. "Mark her for removal." "No." Lena screamed, stepping in front of Scylla. "She's my mom." The officer frowned. "She's not human. She's my mom." Lena shouted again, louder this time. "She takes care of me. She protects me. She gave me everything." "She's an illegal alien," the officer said firmly. "She's not allowed to stay." Lena's voice cracked, her eyes full of fire. "Then take me too." "Because I'm not staying without her." The camp had gone silent. People stepped closer. Watching, whispering, the officer looked around, uncomfortable under so many eyes. He grabbed his radio. "Camp director, we have a situation." A few moments later, a woman arrived. Wearing a long coat and holding a data tablet, she was tall, older, with gray hair tied in a tight braid. She looked at the scene, then at Lena. Her eyes softened slightly. "What's going on here?" she asked. The officer saluted. "This alien has a false ID. She must be removed." The director looked at Scylla, then at Lena. She knelt down beside the girl and asked gently, "Is she really your mother?" Lena nodded, tears in her eyes. "She takes care of me more than anyone else ever did. And if she leaves—" "I leave too," Lena said. "I'll walk into the desert if I have to." The director stood slowly, thinking deeply. She turned to the officer. "You say the ID is fake." "Yes, ma'am." "But you don't say her heart is." The officer blinked, confused. "She's not dangerous," the director said, her voice sharp. "She hasn't caused trouble. She works in the water station. She feeds a child. She broke the law." The officer replied, "She built a family." The director said, "Sometimes that matters more." She looked down at Lena again. "Would you like her to stay with you? Officially?" Lena's face lit up. "Yes." The director nodded. "Then we'll make it official." She tapped on her tablet and signed a document with her thumb. "This woman is now a recognized guardian under camp protection." The officer's face turned red with frustration. "You're bending protocol," he said. "I'm following something bigger than protocol." She replied, "Compassion." The officer gave Scylla one last look. "This isn't over," he muttered, then walked away. The crowd around them broke into quiet claps. No cheers, no noise, just quiet respect. Scylla sank to her knees, overwhelmed. Lena hugged her tightly, laughing through tears. "We did it, Mom." Scylla held her daughter close. The title finally real mother, not by law at first. Not by species or system, but now by bond, by voice, and by choice. She had passed the test. Not with a scanner, not with papers, but with love. And it had been enough. The sun rose gently over the refugee camp. The air was calm, the streets were quiet. And for the first time in weeks, Scylla felt something rare: peace. No one stared anymore. No one whispered. Now, when she passed by, people nodded respectfully. Some smiled, some even offered bread. She was no longer just the alien widow. She was Lena's mom, and that name. It meant more to her than any title she had ever carried before. Since the camp director signed the guardianship papers, things had changed. Scylla received a small shelter unit, one with a working solar light, a proper roof, and 2 sleeping pads. Lena decorated the walls with drawings. One showed a tall blue alien woman holding the hand of a small human girl. Both had wide smiles, and above them, Lena had written in shaky letters, "My family." Scylla helped at the water station during the day. She was quiet, careful, but steady. She never complained, never asked for more. The humans began to respect her because she worked hard, and because she never left Lena's side every evening. The two of them sat outside their shelter. They shared warm tea when they could get it. They talked about the stars, the future, and dreams. Lena would say, "One day, I'll fly a ship." Scylla would smile softly and reply, "I'll fly with you." But there was still one piece missing: a name. Not just any name, but a real one, official. Something Lena could carry in every record. One evening, the camp director visited their shelter again. She brought a data pad and a quiet smile. "I thought it's time we finish this," she said, handing the pad to Lena. "You can choose what name goes on your guardian's records." Lena looked up at Scylla with bright eyes. "You choose," she said. "You're my mom." Scylla hesitated. She had been called many names in her life: healer, wife, fugitive, widow. But now she wanted something new. Something that matched the life she had found, not the one she had lost. She touched her chest and then Lena's. Then slowly said, "C." "Lena," the director looked surprised. "You're joining your names?" Scylla nodded. "She is my heart now," she said quietly. "I am hers." The director smiled and typed it in. "Very well," she said. "Scylla Lena, guardian of child. Lena Morayan." It was done with a tap of the screen. Scylla became not just a name in the shadows, but a mother in the light, a citizen of the camp, and more importantly, a family. That night, Lena brought out something wrapped in cloth. It was a small loaf of fresh bread, round, soft, still warm from the heat-stone ovens. "I traded my drawings for it," she said proudly. The scent filled their shelter with warmth. They sat together, broke the bread in half, and shared it under the stars. Scylla took a bite and closed her eyes. It wasn't just food, it was everything: memory, pain, joy, love, survival, and peace. She looked at Lena, who smiled with crumbs on her cheek. And in that moment, Scylla realized something. She had begged for bread once. She had walked the streets with nothing but hunger in her bones. But instead of food, she had been given something greater. A child who said, "Be my mom instead." And from that moment, everything changed. Scylla no longer felt like a shadow. She no longer carried only grief. Now she carried laughter, morning hugs, sleepy yawns, and silly songs. She carried stories shared in whispers, drawings stuck to walls, and a tiny hand in hers. She had found not just a home, but a life. Lena had given it to her, and Scylla would guard it forever. Weeks turned. 2 months, the officer never returned, and the camp slowly became a better place. Not perfect, but safer. People talked more, helped more, even smiled at strangers sometimes. Maybe seeing an alien and a child become family reminded them what mattered. One evening, Lena climbed onto Scylla's lap. Tired from running all day, she looked up at her mom and said, "Do you miss your old home?" Scylla thought for a moment, then shook her head slowly. "This is my home now," she said. "Where you are?" Lena smiled sleepily and whispered, "Then you'll never be hungry again." And Scylla knew it was true. Not because there was always food, but because her heart was full of love, full of belonging, full of family.